I stood at the front of the rented gallery space in downtown Portland, champagne flute trembling in my hand, watching my cousin Bryn weave through the crowd of investors and early customers, with a manila envelope pressed against her sequined dress like a weapon. The launch party for Meridian Collective, my sustainable fashion marketplace, had been running for exactly 47 minutes. String lights glowed against exposed brick. Local jazz played softly. People laughed and browsed racks of ethically sourced clothing while discussing investment opportunities. Then Bryn arrived, and the air changed. She didn't greet me, didn't congratulate me. She walked straight to the makeshift stage where I'd been preparing to give my welcome speech, heels clicking against polished concrete, and thrust the envelope toward me with a smile that looked carved from ice. "This is for you," she said loudly enough that nearby conversations faltered, "since you wouldn't return my calls." I stared at the envelope, my business partner Maya frozen beside me with a tray of hors d'oeuvres halfway to a table. "What is this?" I asked, though something cold and certain was already settling in my stomach. "Open it and find out." Bryn's voice carried across the room now, drawing more attention. "Or should I tell everyone here what you did?" Before I could respond, Maya stepped between us, her voice low and firm. "Whatever this is, it can wait until after the event." Bryn laughed, sharp and bitter. "Oh, I don't think so. See, everyone here is about to invest in a company built on stolen intellectual property. They deserve to know." The room went quiet. Not the polite quiet of people pretending not to listen. The absolute quiet of people who had stopped everything to watch. I felt my throat close. Months of work, years, if I counted the planning, suddenly balanced on whatever was inside that envelope. For those listening to this, I wonder where you are right now. Maybe commuting home after a long day, or folding laundry while the world moves on without pause. When this happened to me, I was standing in a room full of strangers who I'd hoped would become partners, watching my family try to destroy everything I'd built. I'd love to know where you're hearing this story, because knowing you're out there somehow makes the weight of what I'm about to share feel less lonely. My hands shook as I opened the envelope. Inside was a civil complaint. Bryn Keller v. Darcy Chen. Theft of intellectual property. Breach of confidential relationship. Demand for 50% ownership of Valthek Collective or $500,000 in damages. I read it twice while the room watched. Maya leaned over my shoulder, her breath catching audibly. "This is insane," she whispered. Bryn crossed her arms, satisfaction evident in the tilt of her chin. "You stole my business plan, Darcy. The one I showed you 3 years ago at Christmas when I needed feedback. The sustainable marketplace, the focus on ethical sourcing, even the name. I came up with Meridian first." "That's not," I started, but she talked over me. "I have proof. Emails, documents, timestamps. You took my idea and ran with it while I was still getting my MBA. While I was busy with school, you were busy stealing." A murmur rippled through the crowd. I saw investors exchange glances. Someone set down their champagne glass with a sharp clink. "That's not what happened," I said, forcing my voice to stay level even as my pulse hammered. "We had one conversation about sustainable fashion. That's it. Everything else was mine," Bryn interrupted. She turned to address the room directly, playing to the audience. "I shared my vision with my cousin because I trusted her. Because we're family. And she took it, filed for an LLC without telling me, and now she's here celebrating like she created something original." Maya's hand found my elbow, steadying. "We have documentation too," she said. "Business plans, incorporation papers, everything predates." "Oh, I'm sure you do," Bryn said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Darcy's always been good at covering her tracks, always been the golden child who could do no wrong." She looked back at me. "But not this time." She turned to leave, pausing at the door just long enough to call back. "See you in court, cousin. Hope your investors enjoy funding a lawsuit instead of a business." The door closed behind her with a soft click that somehow felt louder than a slam. The silence that followed pressed against my chest like a physical weight. Slowly, conversations resumed, but different now. Quieter, more cautious. I watched people drift toward the exit, making excuses, promising to circle back after things clarified. By the time the last guest left, the gallery felt cavernous and cold, despite the string lights still glowing against the brick. Maya locked the door and leaned against it, exhaling slowly. What just happened? I sank into one of the chairs we'd arranged for the networking session that never quite materialized. My cousin is suing me for theft of intellectual property. Based on what? A conversation 3 years ago? Apparently. I rubbed my face, careful not to smudge what was left of my makeup. God, Maya, what if people believe her? They won't. They can't. But Maya's voice held a thread of uncertainty that made my stomach turn. My phone buzzed, then buzzed again. Social media notifications flooding in. I opened Instagram to find that Bryn had posted a photo of herself outside the gallery, caption reading, "Sometimes family disappoints you in the worst ways. Stay tuned for the truth about @Meridian Collective." Comments were already stacking up, some supportive of her, some demanding context, some simply enjoying the drama. I closed the app before I could read more. "We need a lawyer," Maya said. "I know. Like tomorrow. I know." She came over and sat beside me, our shoulders touching. "This is going to be okay. We have proof of everything. The business plan you wrote 2 years ago, the incorporation documents, the trademark filing, all of it. But what if that's not enough?" The words came out smaller than I intended. What if the lawsuit alone is enough to kill the company before it even starts? Maya didn't answer right away. When she did, her voice was firm. "Then we fight, because Meridian is yours, Darcy, and I'm not letting anyone take that from you." I wanted to believe her, but sitting in that empty gallery surrounded by the remnants of a launch party that had imploded, all I could think about was how fast things had fallen apart, and how much farther they might still fall. To understand how my cousin and I ended up on opposite sides of a lawsuit, you have to go back. Not to 3 years ago at Christmas, though that's where Bryn claims this story starts, but to our childhood, when the patterns were set long before either of us knew what intellectual property meant. The Chen and Keller families had always been close. My mother and Bryn's mother were sisters who'd grown up in a cramped San Francisco apartment, sharing everything from clothes to dreams. They'd married men who worked in tech during the boom, moved to comfortable suburbs, and had daughters within months of each other. Bryn arrived first in March. I followed in June. We were raised like sisters. Same schools, same activities, same family vacations to Lake Tahoe every summer. For years, it worked. We were genuinely close. But somewhere around middle school, things shifted. Subtle at first. The way adults compared us at family gatherings. Darcy got straight A's again. Bryn's trying so hard. Darcy made the varsity team as a sophomore. Bryn's really improved this year. I didn't ask for those comparisons, didn't want them, but they accumulated like sediment, building a foundation of resentment I didn't fully recognize until much later. In high school, Bryn started dating Marcus Chen, no relation to me, despite the shared surname. He was captain of the debate team, already committed to USC. Bryn was devoted to him, planning her college choices around his. She applied only to Southern California schools, determined they'd stay together. Then Marcus and I got paired for a history project. We spent weeks researching, writing, presenting, won a regional competition. And somewhere in all those library sessions, he realized we had more in common than he'd thought. He broke up with Bryn 2 weeks before prom, asked me out 3 days later. I said no. Immediately, definitively. I told him it would destroy my relationship with Bryn, that I valued her more than any potential romance. He accepted it gracefully, went to prom with someone else, and moved to USC at summer's end. But Bryn never quite believed me. "You wanted him," she said one night that summer, her voice tight with accusation. "Everyone saw how you looked at him during that project." "I didn't." "You're always like this, taking things that should be mine, being better at everything. Mom and Dad are always comparing me to you. Always." "That's not my fault," I said quietly. "I never asked them to." "You never have to ask. It just happens. Perfect Darcy who gets perfect grades and makes perfect choices, and now even my boyfriend wants you instead of me." "He doesn't want me." I said no. "Because you knew it would make you look bad. But you wanted to say yes. I know you did." No amount of denial penetrated. She'd constructed a narrative where I was the villain, and nothing I said could shake it. We went to different colleges. She chose UCSB for marine biology. I went to Portland State for business. The distance helped. We texted occasionally, Maintained a polite surface relationship at family gatherings, but the warmth was gone, replaced by something careful and cool. Then came Christmas 3 years ago. The whole family gathered at my aunt's house in San Jose. Bryn was finishing her senior year at UCSB, already talking about graduate programs. I'd graduated the previous spring and was working at a sustainable fashion startup in Portland, learning the industry from the ground up. After dinner, Bryn found me in the kitchen loading the dishwasher. "Can I pick your brain about something?" she asked. "Of course." She pulled out her phone, showing me a rough sketch in her notes app. "I'm thinking about starting a business after grad school. An online marketplace for sustainable fashion, connecting ethical brands with conscious consumers. What do you think?" I looked at the notes. They were vague, bullet points about sustainability and marketplace models, but nothing specific. No brand names, no business structure, no market research. "It's an interesting concept," I said carefully. "The sustainable fashion space is growing, but the execution would be everything. There are already some platforms doing this." "I know, but I think I could do it better." She chewed her lip. "Would you help me develop it? You're working in fashion now, you'd know what works." "I'm pretty junior at my company, but I can give feedback if you put together a real plan." "That would be amazing." She hugged me, quick and tight. "Thanks, Darcy. This could be really big." We talked for maybe 15 more minutes. I mentioned a few platforms I'd researched for my own job: Reformation, Everlane, ThreadUp. I suggested she look into B Corp certification and supply chain transparency standards. Basic stuff anyone in the industry would know. Then her boyfriend called and she disappeared to take it, and that was the last we discussed it. I didn't think about that conversation again for months. I was too busy with my own trajectory. 6 months after that Christmas, I quit my job at the startup. The company was struggling, pivoting away from sustainability toward fast fashion to chase profitability. It felt like a betrayal of everything I cared about. I spent weeks wrestling with what to do next. Work for another company that might compromise its values? Go back to school? Find a different career entirely? Then Maya, my friend from college who'd gone into web development, called with a proposition. "What if we started something?" she said. "You know sustainable fashion. I know how to build platforms. We could create the kind of marketplace you keep saying should exist." The idea terrified and thrilled me in equal measure. We spent months researching, planning, modeling financial projections. I poured my savings into market research and legal consultations. Maya built prototypes and tested user experience flows. We incorporated Meridian Collective in September, when SWORP filed for trademark protection in October, and officially launched our beta platform in January. I didn't tell Bryn, not because I was hiding it. I'd barely told anyone outside of Maya and the vendors we were courting. I was superstitious about announcing things before they were real, afraid of jinxing the fragile thing we were building. But also, if I'm honest, I didn't want to invite comparison or judgment from family. Didn't want my aunt asking if I was sure I could handle running a business, or my uncle suggesting I should find a real job with benefits. Didn't want the pressure of family expectations on something that felt too new and vulnerable. I told myself I'd share it once we had proof of concept, once we could show that this thing was working. The first time Bryn learned about Meridian was when she saw my LinkedIn post announcing our seed funding. A small angel investment, but enough to take us from beta to full launch. She called me immediately. "You started a sustainable fashion marketplace?" Her voice was strange, tight and high. "Yeah. Maya and I have been building it for about a year." "A sustainable fashion marketplace," she repeated. "That's my idea, Darcy." My stomach dropped. "What? I told you about that idea. At Christmas, we talked about it. We had a conversation about the concept, but... And then you went and built it. Without telling me, without including me." "Bryn, that conversation was barely 15 minutes. You mentioned it as something you were thinking about for after grad school. It wasn't a developed plan. It was my idea, and you stole it." The accusation felt like a slap. I didn't steal anything. I built this from scratch. Maya and I put in over a year of work. Using the framework I gave you, the concept I shared when I trusted you. The concept of a sustainable marketplace isn't proprietary. There are dozens of companies doing some version of this. But I told you first. I brought it to you, and instead of helping me like you promised, you took it for yourself. I never promised to help you build a business. I said I'd give feedback if you developed a plan. This is exactly like high school, she said, her voice breaking. You take everything, you always have. Bryn. She hung up. I stared at my phone, a sick feeling spreading through my chest. I told myself she was being irrational. That anyone who knew the timeline would see I hadn't stolen anything. That she'd calm down once she thought about it clearly. I was wrong about that last part. Over the next 6 months, as Meridian grew, Bryn's anger calcified into something harder. She posted vague references on social media about people who betray family trust and stolen ideas. She told relatives I'd cut her out of a business we'd planned together. She built a narrative where I was the villain and she was the wronged victim. I tried to address it directly once, calling her and asking if we could talk things through. She refused. You made your choice, she said coldly. Now, live with it. So I focused on Meridian. We onboarded new vendors, refined our platform, built relationships with ethical brands. The work consumed me, and I told myself that was enough. That Bryn would eventually see I hadn't stolen anything, that our conversation had been so minimal it couldn't reasonably be called theft. I told myself a lot of things. Then came the launch party. And Bryn. And the lawsuit that would force us both to prove which version of the story was true. The lawyer Maya found was named Rachel Voss. She worked out of a sleek office downtown, all glass and steel, with framed bar certifications from Oregon and California on the wall behind her desk. She was in her early 40s, sharp-eyed, dressed in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than my first month of rent in Portland. She listened to my story without interrupting, occasionally making notes on a yellow legal pad. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair. Do you have documentation of your business development? Everything, Maya said before I could answer. She pulled up a shared drive on her laptop. Business plans, financial models, incorporation papers, trademark applications, all dated and time-stamped. Rachel scrolled through the documents, her expression neutral. And the conversation with your cousin, the one at Christmas. Did you exchange any written communication about it afterward? I shook my head. It was just verbal. Maybe 15 minutes in her mom's kitchen. Did she send you any follow-up? Plans? Proposals? Anything in writing? No. She mentioned it once more in a text a few weeks later, asking if I'd thought more about the marketplace idea. I said I'd been busy with work. That was it. Rachel made another note. And when did you first start actively developing Meridian? I quit my job in June. Maya and I started serious planning in July. We incorporated in September. So roughly 6 months after the conversation with Bryn. Yes. And you never discussed your plans with her during that development period? No. We weren't really talking much in general. Rachel closed her laptop. Here's the situation. Bryn's claim is based on what's called idea theft, the allegation that you took a confidential business concept she shared with you and developed it without her. These cases are tricky because ideas themselves aren't protected by intellectual property law. Execution is. So she doesn't have a case? Hope flickered in my chest. Not necessarily. She could argue that your conversation established a confidential relationship, that she shared specific proprietary elements with the reasonable expectation you wouldn't use them without her involvement. If she can prove that, and prove that Meridian incorporates those specific elements, she might have standing. The hope guttered. But our conversation was so vague, she didn't have a developed plan. That's your strongest defense. If you can show that Meridian's actual business model, platform, structure, vendor relationships, and branding are substantially different from anything she discussed, you undermine her claim. The burden of proof is on her to show not just that you had a conversation, but that you took specific, proprietary concepts from that conversation. We can do that, Maya said firmly. Everything we built is documented. The research, the decisions, the pivots. We can show our process. Rachel nodded. Good. I'll need all of it. Every piece of development documentation, every email discussing the business, every version of your business plan. I also want character witnesses, people who can speak to your independent work ethic and integrity, and I want a timeline of your relationship with Bryn. Every major interaction, especially anything that shows the dynamic between you. My stomach churned. Why does our relationship matter? Because family cases are rarely just about intellectual property. They're about patterns, histories, perceived slights. Bryn isn't just claiming you stole an idea, she's claiming you're the kind of person who would steal from family. We need to counter that narrative. Over the next 2 weeks, I lived in documents. Maya and I compiled everything we'd created for Meridian, every business plan iteration, every mock-up, every email chain. We pulled our incorporation papers, showing when we'd filed and what we'd submitted. We gathered our trademark applications, vendor contracts, investment term sheets. The evidence was overwhelming. Our business model was detailed and specific, developed through months of research and testing. The name Meridian came from my love of navigation and finding ethical true north. Nothing to do with anything Bryn had mentioned. Our platform architecture, user experience, and vendor curation process were entirely our own. But I also had to compile documentation of my relationship with Bryn. And that meant revisiting years of small wounds. I scrolled through old text messages, finding the conversation from 3 years ago where she'd mentioned the marketplace idea once more. Hey, did you think any more about that sustainable marketplace concept? Been so busy with work. You should totally develop it if you're serious. Maybe after grad school. Would be cool to work on together someday. Me, definitely. Let me know if you put together a real plan. That was it. No follow-up, no detailed discussions, no shared documents or business plans. I also found messages from months later after I'd quit my job. Me, hey, how's the semester going? Good, busy. Let me know if you want to grab coffee over winter break. Maybe. We never did get that coffee. The distance between us had already been growing, and I'd been too consumed with Meridian to bridge it. But I also found other things. Messages from high school, from college. Patterns of Bryn interpreting my successes as personal attacks. Of her assuming the worst about my motivations. When I showed Rachel the compiled evidence, she read through it methodically. "This is good," she said finally. "The text exchange shows she never had a developed plan. The rest shows a pattern of her misinterpreting your actions. But Darcy, I need to ask, is there any part of Meridian that did come from that conversation? Even inspiration or a jumping-off point?" I thought about it honestly. The broad concept of a sustainable marketplace existed in my mind before that Christmas. I was working in sustainable fashion already, thinking about how the industry needed better platforms. Bryn and I talked about that concept because it was something I was already interested in. But the specific execution of Meridian, everything about how we built it, came from Maya's work. Can you prove you were thinking about sustainable fashion marketplaces before that Christmas? I opened my old work laptop, pulling up emails from my previous job. There were dozens of threads discussing marketplace models, sustainability certification, vendor sourcing, all dated before Christmas, 3 years ago. "I was literally researching this for my old company," I said. That's why I had opinions to share when Bryn brought it up. I was already immersed in the space. Rachel smiled for the first time since we'd met. Now we're getting somewhere. The preliminary hearing was set for 6 weeks after Bryn filed. Rachel explained that we'd be arguing for dismissal based on lack of merit, that Bryn couldn't prove a legitimate case of intellectual property theft. "The goal is to end this before it goes to full trial," Rachel said. "Save you legal costs and get Meridian back on track." But as the hearing date approached, Bryn doubled down. She posted more on social media, each post carefully worded to avoid direct defamation, but clearly implying I'd stolen from her. She gave an interview to a local business blog titled "When Family Betrays Trust," where she painted herself as a victimized entrepreneur whose idea was stolen by someone she'd trusted. The interview went semi-viral in Portland's startup community. I started getting emails from potential vendors asking if the allegations were true. One investor, who'd been considering our Series A, pulled out entirely, citing reputational concerns. Maya found me crying in the Meridian office, a shared workspace we'd rented, one afternoon after a particularly brutal vendor call. "They're backing out," I said. "The organic cotton supplier I've been courting for 6 months. They said they can't partner with a company facing ethical questions." Maya sat beside me on the small couch that functioned as our meeting area. We'll find others. What if we don't? What if Bryn destroys this before we even get to defend ourselves? Then we build something else, Maya said quietly. But I don't think it'll come to that. The truth is on our side, Darcy, and Rachel's good. I wanted to believe her. But sitting in that small office, watching our carefully built company crumble under the weight of accusations, it was hard to see how truth would be enough. The night before the hearing, my mother called. Darcy, honey, I think you should settle with Bryn. My chest tightened. Mom, I know you think you're right, but this is tearing the family apart. Your aunt isn't speaking to me. Thanksgiving is going to be a nightmare. If you just gave Bryn something, maybe a small percentage of the company or a settlement, this could all go away. I didn't steal from her. I'm not saying you did, but sometimes being right isn't as important as being family. The words hit harder than they should have. So I should let her claim credit for something she didn't build? Let her take part of a company she never worked on? I'm saying maybe the cost of fighting isn't worth it. Meridian is just a business. Bryn is your cousin. Meridian is 2 years of my life, of Maya's life. It's every dollar I had saved. It's proof that I could build something meaningful. How is that just a business? My mother sighed. I'm trying to help you see the bigger picture. No, I said quietly. You're trying to help Aunt Linda because she's upset that her daughter is facing consequences for making false accusations. That's not fair. Neither is asking me to sacrifice something I built to keep peace at Thanksgiving. She was quiet for a long moment. I'm just asking you to think about what matters. After we hung up, I sat on my apartment floor and let myself cry properly. Not delicate tears, but the ugly, gasping kind. Because she was right about one thing. This was costing me. If I lost, Meridian would probably die under the weight of legal fees and damaged reputation. But if I won, I'd still lose something. The family dinners, the casual texts, the sense of belonging to something larger than myself. I'd already lost Bryn. Now I was losing my mother's unqualified support too. But in the morning, I showered, dressed in my most professional outfit, a navy suit I'd bought for investor meetings, and met Rachel outside the courthouse. Ready? She asked. I thought about Meridian, about Maya's faith in me, about every vendor who'd chosen to trust us despite the noise, about the version of myself that had quit a job over compromised values and decided to build something better. Yes, I said, I'm ready. The courtroom was smaller than I'd expected. Wood-paneled walls, fluorescent lights, a handful of observers scattered through the gallery. Bryn sat at the plaintiff's table with her attorney, a silver-haired man named Robert Keller, her father's cousin, conveniently also a lawyer. She didn't look at me as I took my seat beside Rachel. Judge Sarah Martinez reviewed the case documents with calm efficiency. She was a woman in her late 50s, with short gray hair and reading glasses perched on her nose. This is a preliminary hearing on a motion to dismiss, she said. The question before the court is whether the plaintiff has presented sufficient evidence to merit a full trial. Mr. Keller, you may present your argument. Robert stood, smoothing his tie. Your Honor, this is a straightforward case of idea theft. Miss Keller shared a detailed business concept with Miss Chen, her cousin, during a family gathering 3 years ago. Miss Chen then developed that concept without Miss Keller's involvement or consent, violating the confidential relationship between them. What evidence do you have that a confidential relationship was established? Judge Martinez asked. Miss Keller specifically sought Miss Chen's input as a family member working in the fashion industry. The conversation occurred in a private setting. Miss Keller shared proprietary information with the reasonable expectation it would be kept confidential. And what proprietary information was shared? Robert pulled out a document. Miss Keller's notes from that time period show she'd developed a comprehensive vision for a sustainable fashion marketplace, including the business model, target demographic, and even potential names. She shared these details with Miss Chen. Rachel leaned forward. Your Honor, we'd like to see those notes. Judge Martinez nodded. Approach. Rachel took the document Robert offered, studying it carefully. I watched her eyebrows rise incrementally. When she returned to our table, she showed me the pages. They were dated, but I noticed immediately that the metadata showed they'd been created recently, then backdated. The document claimed to be from 3 years ago, but the file properties said it had been generated 2 weeks before the lawsuit was filed. Rachel stood. Your Honor, these notes appear to have been created recently, despite the date claim. We'd like to submit the document metadata for technical analysis. Robert's face tightened. That's immaterial. The content reflects what was discussed. If the plaintiff is fabricating evidence, that's very material, Rachel replied smoothly. Judge Martinez made a note. We'll set that aside for now. Ms. Voss, your turn. Rachel stood, projecting confidence. Your Honor, this case fails on multiple grounds. First, the plaintiff cannot prove that any confidential relationship was established. The conversation in question lasted approximately 15 minutes at a family gathering. No non-disclosure agreement was signed. No business partnership was discussed. Ms. Chen offered general advice about an industry she was already working in. Advice anyone could have accessed through basic research. Second, even if we accept that a conversation occurred, the plaintiff cannot prove that Meridian Collective incorporates any proprietary concepts from that conversation. Ms. Chen has provided extensive documentation, she gestured to our thick binder of evidence, showing that Meridian's business model, platform architecture, vendor relationships, and branding are entirely original work developed over 18 months with her business partner, Maya Santos. She pulled out a document. This is an email from Ms. Chen to colleagues at her previous employer, dated 8 months before the conversation with Ms. Keller. In it, she discusses marketplace models for sustainable fashion and critiques existing platforms. This proves she was already thinking about and researching this space before Ms. Keller ever mentioned her vague concept. Judge Martinez took the email, reading carefully. Furthermore, Rachel continued, Ms. Chen incorporated Meridian Collective and filed for trademark protection months after their conversation, with detailed business plans that looked nothing like Ms. Keller's alleged notes. The name Meridian was chosen for its navigation connotations, finding true north, not anything Ms. Keller discussed. The platform's user experience, vendor curation process, and certification standards are all original. She paused, letting it land. Your Honor, this isn't idea theft. This is family drama dressed up as intellectual property dispute. 2 cousins had a passing conversation about a broad industry trend. One cousin went on to build an actual business. The other cousin, upon learning of that success, retroactively claimed ownership. That's not how intellectual property law works, and it's not grounds for a lawsuit. Judge Martinez turned to Robert. Mr. Keller, can you provide any concrete evidence that Ms. Chen took specific, proprietary elements from your client's concept? Robert shuffled papers. The entire business model. Be specific. What elements? The focus on sustainability, the marketplace platform, the targeting of conscious consumers. Those are broad industry trends, Judge Martinez said. They're not proprietary concepts belonging to Ms. Keller. Can you show any specific unique element that Ms. Chen took? Robert hesitated. The totality of the concept. The totality is not protectable under intellectual property law. The judge interrupted. Ideas are not protected. Execution is. Can you show that Ms. Chen's execution copied your client's work? She used information gained from their confidential conversation to develop her business. What information specifically? The silence that followed told me everything. Judge Martinez removed her glasses, rubbing the bridge of her nose. Mr. Keller, I've reviewed your client's complaint and supporting materials. I've also reviewed Ms. Chen's motion to dismiss and the extensive documentation she's provided. I see no evidence that Ms. Keller had developed a proprietary business plan beyond a vague concept. I see no evidence that Ms. Chen took specific unique elements from any conversation. I see no evidence that a confidential business relationship was established. She picked up her gavel. What I see is a young woman who worked in sustainable fashion, had a casual conversation with her cousin about industry trends, and then, months later decided to start her own business in that space. That's not theft, that's entrepreneurship. Bryn's face went pale. This case is dismissed with prejudice, Judge Martinez said. Furthermore, I'm awarding attorney fees to the defendant. Ms. Keller, this lawsuit was frivolous and appears designed to damage Ms. Chen's business reputation. That's not what our court system is for. The gavel came down. I sat very still, trying to process what had just happened. We'd won. Not just won. The judge had called the lawsuit frivolous, had ordered Bryn to pay our legal fees. Beside me, Rachel was already packing up documents, her expression professionally neutral, but satisfaction evident in the set of her shoulders. Across the aisle, Bryn stood abruptly, knocking her chair back. She looked at me for the first time since entering the courtroom, her eyes bright with tears and rage. "You always win," she said, voice shaking. "Always. No matter what I do, no matter how hard I try, you just win." "Bryn," I started, but she was already leaving, Robert following with his briefcase, his face carefully blank. My Aunt Linda, who'd been sitting in the gallery, rushed after them. She paused just long enough to shoot me a look of pure disappointment before disappearing through the door. Maya grabbed my hand, squeezing hard. "We did it. We did it," I repeated, but the words felt strange, hollow despite being true. Rachel turned to me. The judge's ruling was as definitive as they come. "Bryn can't refile. This is over." "Then why doesn't it feel over?" I asked quietly. Rachel's expression softened. "Because legal victory doesn't heal family wounds. But you protected what you built, Darcy. That matters." Outside the courthouse, Portland's gray sky stretched overhead, rain threatening but not yet falling. Maya bought us coffee from a cart, and we stood on the steps, watching people pass. "What now?" Maya asked. I thought about Meridian, about the vendors who'd stuck with us through the lawsuit, about the investors who'd waited to see how this resolved, about the platform we'd built and the values it represented. "Now we build," I said. "Properly, without looking over our shoulder." Maya smiled. "I can work with that." My phone buzzed, a text from my mother. "Your aunt says Bryn is devastated. I hope you're happy." I stared at the message for a long moment, then put my phone away without responding. Some bridges burn because someone sets them on fire. Others burn because standing on them becomes untenable, and walking away is the only choice that preserves what you've built. I didn't know yet if my family would forgive me for refusing to be small enough to fit their narrative, but I knew I'd forgiven myself for being big enough to succeed. And right then, standing on the courthouse steps with rain starting to fall and my business partner beside me, that was enough. 6 months after the hearing, Meridian Collective secured Series A funding. A $2 million investment from an impact fund that specialized in sustainable businesses. We hired our first full-time employees. We expanded our vendor network to include 50 ethical brands across apparel, accessories, and home goods. We hit $500,000 in gross merchandise value. More importantly, we started hearing from customers. People who'd been looking for a way to shop their values. People who appreciated our certification process and transparent supply chains. People who told us Meridian had changed how they thought about fashion. One email stuck with me. It was from a woman in Seattle who'd been following our story, the lawsuit, the dismissal, the rebuild. "Thank you for not giving up," she wrote. "Thank you for showing that women can build businesses without apologizing for taking up space. My daughter is watching. She's learning that success isn't selfish, that's a gift." I printed that email and pinned it above my desk. "Bryn and I never reconciled." She sent one message after the hearing, short and bitter. "I hope your business was worth losing your family." I didn't respond, because the truth was, I hadn't lost my family. I'd lost a version of family that required me to be smaller, quieter, less successful than I was capable of being. That version had been dying for years anyway. My parents slowly came around. My father first. He called about 4 months after the hearing, awkward but sincere. "I read an article about Meridian in the Business Journal," he said. "It sounds like you're doing something impressive." "Thanks, Dad." I should have said that earlier, before everything got complicated. "Yeah," I agreed. "You should have." He was quiet for a moment. "Your mother and I are proud of you, even if we didn't show it the right way." It wasn't everything, but it was something. My mother took longer. She sent a brief text on my birthday. "Happy birthday, sweetie. Hope you're well." I responded with equal brevity. "Thanks, I am." We were finding our way towards something. Not the close relationship we'd had before, but maybe something more honest. Less comfortable, but more real. My Aunt Linda and uncle stopped inviting me to family events. That hurt more than I wanted to admit. But I'd learned to sit with that hurt. without letting it define me. Some people believe family should forgive anything. That blood creates obligation stronger than boundaries. I'd learned differently. I'd learned that loving people doesn't mean accepting their version of your story. That loyalty to yourself isn't betrayal of others. Bryn eventually moved to San Diego. I heard through family channels that she'd gotten a job in marine conservation, working with a nonprofit that protected coastal ecosystems. Part of me hoped she'd found something meaningful. Another part of me didn't care either way. We existed in separate orbits now, and that was okay. Maya and I hired our 10th employee on a rainy Tuesday in March, almost exactly 2 years after the lawsuit was filed. Her name was Sophie, a 24-year-old designer who'd graduated top of her class and wanted to work somewhere that aligned with her values. During her interview, she asked about the lawsuit. "I read about it," she said. "The articles made it sound really intense. Does that kind of thing make you hesitant to grow? Like, scared someone else will try to claim credit?" I thought about it honestly. For a while, yes, but then I realized that building something worthwhile means accepting that some people will try to tear it down. Usually people who are unhappy with their own choices. The alternative is not building anything, and that feels worse. Sophie smiled. "I really hope you hire me." We did. On the 2-year anniversary of Meridian's launch, the original launch party that Bryn had crashed, we threw another event. Bigger this time. Maya and I stood on a small stage in a gallery 3 times the size of the original, surrounded by employees, vendors, investors, and customers. 2 years ago, I said into the microphone, someone tried to take this company before it even started. They claimed it wasn't really mine, that I'd stolen something that belonged to them. The room went quiet. The courts disagreed, but more importantly, every day since then has proven them wrong. Every vendor who chose to partner with us, every customer who trusted our certification process, every employee who believed in our mission, every dollar invested in our vision. All of it proves that Meridian Collective is exactly what we built it to be. A platform created from scratch by people who refuse to accept that good values and good business are mutually exclusive. I looked at Maya, who nodded encouragement. "So thank you," I continued. "To everyone here who saw what we were building and said yes. Who believed in us when it would have been easier not to. Who proved that success doesn't require taking from others, it requires building something worth having." The applause felt different than it might have 2 years earlier. Less uncertain. More solid. After the event, as the gallery slowly emptied, Maya and I stood by the windows overlooking Portland's skyline, champagne glasses in hand. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if Bryn had won?" Maya asked. "Sometimes. But then I remember she couldn't have won. Because she was fighting for something that was never hers." "Still," Maya said quietly, "it cost you. It cost me people who needed me to stay small," I agreed. "That's different from costing me something valuable." She turned to look at me. "Are you okay? Really?" I thought about it honestly. About the family gatherings I no longer attended, about my cousin who'd become a stranger, about my mother's conditional pride and my aunt's permanent disappointment. "Yeah," I said, "I am. Because I'd rather be this version of myself, the one who fought and built and refused to apologize, than the version who gave up Meridian to keep peace." "Good," Maya said, "because that version of you is my business partner, and I kind of need her." I laughed, and it felt genuine, light. That night, lying in bed, I opened Instagram and saw that Bryn had posted a photo of a sea turtle. The caption read, "Sometimes the best path forward is accepting that not everyone will understand your journey. Trust your own compass." I wondered if she'd written it about me. If she'd convinced herself I was the one who'd diverged from a shared path rather than her being the one who'd tried to claim credit for a road she'd never traveled. It didn't matter anymore. We each had our own narratives. The difference was, mine was backed by evidence, witness testimony, and a judge's ruling. I closed the app and stared at my ceiling. In the morning, I'd go to the office, we'd review our quarterly numbers, we'd discuss expansion into new product categories. We'd make decisions about Meridian's future, one choice at a time. And I'd do it without wondering if someone would try to take it from me, without apologizing for succeeding, without making myself smaller to accommodate someone else's envy. For the first time in my life, I took up exactly as much space as I needed. No more, no less. And in that space, I built something that mattered. If you're listening to this and wondering whether it's worth fighting for something you've built, even when family tells you to let it go, let me tell you, yes, it's worth it. Not because winning feels good, though it does, but because teaching yourself that your work has value, that your effort deserves protection, that you're allowed to say, "This is mine," without guilt, that's worth more than any settlement or family peace based on your silence. Tell me in the comments what you've built that you're proud of, and where you're listening from today. Because sometimes the most important thing we can do is refuse to disappear when people try to erase us. The business I built is real. The family I lost was never built on solid ground anyway, and I'd make the same choice again.